If you're watching this video and you are in your 20s or 30s, hopefully this is going to give you some insight and maybe help you come to terms with what I call it, the quarter-life crisis, as it would be if you're older. And maybe this will help you look back and say, oh yeah, I was like that as well. And if you've got some tips and stuff, please put them in the comments. The idea here is that I want people who are coming up as artists or as creatives to be able to look at this and hopefully help them get through some hard spots, if you will. I kind of wish I had a video like this one. When I was 20, though I did have some great mentors, which actually helped me get through a lot of these things. These tips and things are going to come from my own personal experience, so obviously they might not line up exactly with you, but hopefully they'll be helpful. We're going to jump into 7 things that I wish I knew, or maybe 7 things that I just didn't pay attention to when I was younger. Let's take a second to talk about change. So on some level, I think being younger, you are more open to change. A lot of things are changing, right? You've gone through school, at least high school, let's say, even if you didn't go to college, let's say for photography. You are maybe moving out of your house. You are embracing a new life, right? So you are changing. So you might say, well, didn't you lean into that when you were younger? Yes and no. All those other things, yes. But for me, I kind of had a plan, right? I've talked about this before, and some people say, you're really lucky, and I do feel like I'm lucky. I knew what I wanted to do when I was younger, but I also had very specific thoughts of how it would go down. And well, it didn't go down that way. And because I was open to doing other things, so I'll give kind of a comparison. So I was working as a photo assistant. I had moved to Miami, and I knew that I wanted to start working. And lots of people who I worked with, other photo assistants, also wanted to do fashion. And we were doing some of the same things, trying to shoot minor editorials, getting it with modeling agencies, but that can be very difficult. And believe it or not, a lot of people want to shoot models. I knew that it was time for me to shoot, but I couldn't go directly on the path that I wanted to go to. I couldn't just quit assisting and start doing fashion. The work just wasn't there for me. So what I did was I thought, what can I do? And I started looking for other types of photography that I could do to start my business. And from there, was when I first started leaning into doing more portraiture, which is really the basis of my work now. I took jobs that to a fashion photographer, young Daniel fashion photographer, were like, oh, a portrait of some doctor. But those were my first jobs. And when I was going on assignment as a photographer and learning in the field shooting, a lot of my friends that were doing fashion were still assisting. And yes, I was still trying to shoot editorials. I was still trying to move forward the way I was. But because I changed my focus and said, let me widen a bit. And I know in other videos I've talked about being more focused, but in the beginning I needed to do it. I didn't advertise myself per se as a portrait photographer, but I still looked for that work through connections and other things. And really because I had been, I'll say a good or even great, a photo assistant, a lot of photographers sent me work that they just wasn't for them. You know, somebody would call and say, you know, I need you to do these portraits, and they'd give a quote, and the person would be like, that's like 3 times what I'd charge, and they'd say, well, let me ask my assistant. And that helped me get some of my first work, and some of it was product photography, some of it was portraits, some of it was event photography, stuff that I really didn't necessarily want to do as my final career, but because I was doing it, I was shooting while others were still assisting. Number 2, and these are not in a particular order, of course, is self-discovery. I was very laser focused when I was younger, and this can be fantastic. And I think I probably would not have made it through some certain hard points if I wasn't. At the same time, though, if you already think you know who you are, you won't look for yourself, if that makes sense. And I think that it's important that we are constantly searching and digging, because not only do we not know ourselves when we're younger, we don't know ourselves when we're older, we are always changing. What is ourself will develop and change over time. So always be looking out for something new, something that will help you move forward in life, something that will change the way you think. And sometimes when you look back, you'll realize you're a completely different person because you changed one little thing. Some things, for me, for instance, moving to a completely foreign area, and to me, foreign to me, being from the Northeast of the United States, moving to Florida blindly without knowing anyone, it really made me start to think, what are my values? What do I believe in? And as I met different types of people, different cultures of people, I discovered more about myself. And I'm sure some of those things were in me all along, and some of it changed with time. So self-discovery is super important. And while you're probably doing it without even thinking about it, pay more attention to it and make an effort to break out of your circle of comfort and try different things, not just in the arts, but just in general. Try different foods, travel to new places. If you are someone who is constantly reading, watch a movie. If you're constantly watching a movie, that's probably more like people. Read a book. Read something about something that interests you a little bit, but you don't know much about. Go to a library. Try different things. Self-discovery is key to life, and the sooner you start making it part of your everyday routine, the better you'll be for it. This next one is something I still struggle with. Boy, I think I still struggle with several of these. Let that be a lesson to you, young people. Building relationships that are sustainable and that are important. It is important to do that. The thing is, who you know is going to influence what work you get, what doors open for you. This is cliche. People use it as an excuse or to raise their hand in anger, but it is what it is. Somebody you know is more likely to recommend you than a random person that you sent a postcard to. So as you build up your business or as you go through life, be yourself, obviously. Connect with people that are like you and keep those connections. And when those people reach out to you because they need something, if you can do it, help them. And hopefully, and usually, it works out that they will do the same. How did I get assistants for my first jobs when I was working? The other assistants that I was working with, we helped each other out at discounted rates, sometimes for free, sometimes at full rate if we could. We would never work for an established photographer for a discounted rate, but for each other, yeah, listen, I got to do this magazine shoot that's paying nothing, and I'm paying all the money to a stylist because as a fashion photographer, that's the most important thing. Can you help me out? Sure. I got to shoot next week. Can you help me out? Sure. And that's the beginning. But also, as you meet assistants to the art directors, right, on shoots, don't go after art directors when you're an assistant on a commercial shoot. No, no, no. But you're still meeting people so that later on, those people that are in your position, equivalent, are eventually people making decisions and they know you, right? They've worked with you. So keep connections with people. Don't be fake. Don't, be random and weird. Please. I've met too many of those people. But, build authentic relationships. I think that's super important. And again, I'm mostly leaning towards business, but also just in life. You'd be surprised where a piece of work or an idea for something or a location can come from just from somebody that you met and at a party or something, a mixer. And that person might need, again, help, you might need help, and friends help each other out. So it is really who you know, but it's not just who you know, it's who cares about you and who you care about. Let's talk money. Financial awareness is key to being successful in business and really in life. It's easy to get a big paycheck and then suddenly spend it all. It's easy to be too careful with your money and not buy things when you need it. And what we really want to do is evaluate every bit of work we do, evaluate every piece of gear that we have, especially in the beginning, and really decide, is this going to benefit me and business? I've told this story before. Well, I said a lot in this video. I have shot professionally since the 90s. Let's just say that. And I was an early adopter of digital cameras. I've probably owned 5 in my career. I've owned multiples of cameras, but 5 like workhorse cameras. And that's not that many when you think about it. I know people that have been shooting for 10 years that have owned more than 5 different cameras because they're constantly grabbing cameras every time more resolution, every time there's a new autofocus system. But I always think to myself, what do I need? What do I use in a camera that would make me want to upgrade? And how often do I use this upgradable feature that I might actually want to expend money for the camera? That is to say, when I was doing a lot of catalog work, the main thing I was doing, cameras were shifting and changing quickly. And I made the decision at that point to not buy a medium format camera, even though that's what I used for most of my work. I kept what I call a 35mm camera, like a DSLR, for small projects, web projects, just to have a camera, and I was shooting some film. But I did not buy a medium format digital camera, even though that's what I made most of my money with, even though it made sense on some level for me to have one because I used it enough. But I knew that they were changing so rapidly. The 25 megapixel, I know it sounds like nothing now, camera that I buy now in 2 years is going to be a 50. And that's exactly what happened. So I didn't spend huge amounts of money on a camera and then have to then reinvest it, sell it again. It's like people do with cars, right? For me, it didn't make sense to do that. I would rather not have the overhead. If you are a production studio that shoots all the time, maybe it makes sense to have it. I shot 15 to 20 days a year. So the rest of the year, that camera would be sitting around. And I saw people that ran businesses renting their cameras out and doing other things, but I just decided that was not for me. That was my financial awareness. Whether or not it was the right one, that's what I did. So you have to decide for yourself what's important. Do I need more megapixels? Do I need faster autofocus? Do I need a new flash? Do I need it to be battery powered? Do I need a new computer? What do you need? And yes, sometimes we're going to splurge on things we love. I bought a Leica. Very expensive. I love that camera. I did not need the Leica, but I was doing well and I rewarded myself with it. I did not fool myself into thinking I need this Leica for my work. I knew that the Canons that I was using at the time did the job fine. So think about money. This is a business after all if you're getting into it this way. And if you're not getting into photography as a business, if you're doing it as a hobby, anything you do, think about money, try to invest. I remember, and boy, I wish I had done this in my 20s. I remember smart people, smarter than me, a lot of models actually, were investing in properties and stuff in their 20s. And I'm not saying you should do that, but at the time the market was great for it. And many of them purchased properties that they then sold at great profit, where I didn't, because I felt like for me, I didn't want to manage it. But maybe that would have been smart for me, maybe not. It was smart for them. Think about your own situation and think about finances. You don't necessarily need a financial advisor, but make sure you have a savings account. Make sure you're putting things in bonds. You know what? If you'd like to see more videos about finances, again, I'm not going to be super specific, but let me know, because that's something I might want to talk about a little bit more. It was a big deal for me. It's something I screwed up quite a bit when I was younger, and I think a lot of people do. We go into debt, we buy unnecessarily, we don't pay things off fast enough, and that can be a problem. So if you want more content about that, let me know in the comments below. Anyways, be on top of your finances. Don't be afraid, and this is actually what helped me out. When I was pushing 30, my finances were a mess. And who did I go to? My dad. I was kind of nervous to tell him I had gotten in so much debt and I had all these problems because, you know, he'd always been really good with money. But then it came to me and I said, you know what? If anybody's going to help me with this, it's him. And he did. So when you are looking to fix your finances, if you've already messed them up, go to somebody you trust. Don't just randomly pick a financial advisor because they're often doing it for the money. You get no shade to financial advisors, but maybe find somebody that you know, family member, something like that, that's good with finances, at least to get you started. Anyways, finances, be on top of them. These two things clash: ambition and patience. And what we need to do is find a way to balance those things out in life. Don't be overly patient. Don't sit around and wait for something to happen. Don't just think, well, eventually I'll get my break. But at the same time, being overly ambitious and pushing people out of the way and just trying to strive for that first thing first can bite you. Going back to talking about having relationships, going back to just being a great worker or being a good business person, you need to temper the ambition, right? You should be shooting for what you want to shoot for, even beyond it, really. But at the same time, you have to realize that it might take time. In fact, it will take time. And the thing that's going to happen to you 100%, because it happens to everybody I know, it happened to me, is you're going to get that one big break. And guess what? That's probably not going to be the beginning. It's going to be one thing that happened, and you're going to drop right back down to where you were. But the next time you get a big break, maybe another one will come shortly after. And then drop back down. And the third time, you might get 3 or 4 in a row. Eventually, it builds momentum. But you must be patient in the sense that know it's going to come, but you have to be ambitious to know you got to push for it. Balance that out. Don't be, as they say, that guy. Don't be a jerk. Don't push people out of the way. Don't be full of yourself, but be confident. Be confident, be ambitious, and go for it. I think I've probably told this story before, but I'll say it one more time. I was looking for work as a photo assistant, and this is right around the time I was trying to shoot on my own too. And I had sent out a postcard months before, really. And then I reached out again to follow up to this photographer. They called me back, and the first thing he said was, "So you want to be a photo assistant?" And I said, "No, I want to be a photographer." And it was funny, there was like a pause, and then what he said was, he said, "Well, help me on a shoot and we'll see what we can do." Turns out he was also a graphic designer and was one of the first people to ever get me work as a shooter. We met, he enjoyed my work ethic, how I worked, I showed him my portfolio, and he started hiring me. And I got some of my first photo work from just saying, "No, I don't want to be an assistant, I want to be a photographer, but I will be an assistant." So I was patient and took the job assisting, but I was ambitious to say, this is my end goal. Number 6 is to pay attention to your health. Not just physical health, which I definitely did when I was in my 20s, but mental health. And luckily, I think it's become less taboo of a subject to talk about things like depression or just feeling bad or feeling really great, and understanding and coming to terms with your emotions. When I was younger, it was a little bit different. People weren't as open. And I'm not saying that it's easy for anybody now, obviously, but I think that there are definitely more resources available, and people seem to be more open to that. Now, I was fortunate because I worked in the arts, and I think that they've always been a little bit more open to that, but having conversations about feelings and about your mental health and these kind of things are super important. Find a close group of friends that you feel comfortable talking to, or a counselor, and make it a point to be careful with yourself. Be gentle with your mental health, because it's hard to get out of the spinning cycle if you start going down. Having experienced it myself and seen other people go through it, the sooner you can catch it, the more you feel like you have a group around you that can help you, the more important it can be. So yes, go to the gym, eat well, do all the physical health stuff that is important. Obviously, that's really super simple for me to say, but less simple for me to do, apparently. But mental health is super important. So pay attention to your mental health. Being in the arts is very stressful, and you are constantly being barraged by criticism and failure. And if you are sensitive to those things, as many of us in the arts are, it's weird how those two things go together, be wary. Have close friends, have conversations, and when somebody comes to you and wants to open up with their feelings, be open to it. Try to be that support for somebody else. Of this whole list, I think this is one that I've really embraced in my older self, but I definitely did not when in my 20s. That is to look at failures as a means to learn and move forward. When you don't get the job, when you screw the job up, when you go out and shoot and you spend a bunch of money on a test and it doesn't come out the way you want, look at those things not as throw the film across the room failure, but rather a way to grow. What did I do that made it not work? What didn't I do? How can I learn from this? Are there people I can reach out to help me learn? Can I do something different? Did I do everything right and it was just the way it was and I have to just basically take that in? Failure is one of the best ways to learn, unfortunately. Again, going back to that first break I had, I know I've talked about this before, but when I went on my very first job that I would consider a real job from a photographer who didn't know me, who hired me, they sent me out to do this portrait and I screwed it up. Big time. I believe the quote was, "This is the worst portrait shoot I've ever seen," from the editor. And thankfully, because I had established a relationship and because I was not a jerk and because I was like, oh, what can I do? They gave me a chance. They said, deadline's in 2 days. I don't care how you do it. Get this person to sit for another portrait and make it right. And I did. And from that point on, I continued to shoot for that client. And I was forever grateful for hearing, "This is the worst portrait shoot I've ever seen," versus just never hearing from them again. Knowing that it was bad, knowing that I had screwed it up, and understanding what I had to do, because of course there was a longer conversation, plus I looked at the work, it allowed me to grow. I went into it too confident, basically, too sure of myself, kind of above this type of work, and realized all work requires skill, requires patience, requires you to actually care about it if you want to get a great shot. And that lesson has stuck with me throughout my career. Let every failure, let every roll of film that doesn't come out, every screw up that you made on an invoice, every time that you had to reshoot something, let that teach you to be a better creator and a better business person, and that will carry you through your career. You're gonna mess up a lot. Admit it, see what you can do to fix it. Some people will just be like, no, that was terrible, go away. And that's also fine, another lesson learned, right? Other people, great people in my opinion, will give you another chance if they can. And that's fantastic. Embrace failure, try not to do it too much, but embrace it as a learning moment, and it'll make you a better artist. Okay, so those were 7 things that I kind of wish I knew or did better when I was in my 20s. Some of them I'm still working on. I'd love to know in the comments below if you've got some tips for people that are just starting in business or people later in life that need to get their stuff together. Let's say, again, if you're younger, I would love to hear from you. What are your questions? You're starting a business, you're trying to break into the arts. What are your questions? And I can do my best to give you some advice there from my own experience. Also, the people in the comments, I know that a lot of people that watch this channel have a lot of experience. They've done photography, they've done other types of businesses, so please feel free to help each other out. That's what we're here for. Speaking of that, check out the description. You're gonna find a link to my Discord server. Great community over there. We talk about philosophy, we talk about gear, we talk about all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, check the description. Go ahead and like the video if you did. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, do all the good YouTube stuff. I'll talk to you soon.